But before that, let me tell you there is a celestial event happening today. I'm sure some of you might be aware there is a lunar eclipse that's happening tonight. Hopefully the skies are clear. You will observe an eclipse, a partial eclipse that starts at 11:30 p.m. and it goes on till the next morning, tomorrow morning. Hopefully you observe it. But today I'm going to start with another eclipse that happened, another total lunar eclipse that happened half a millennia ago. The year was 1504, the month was February. And there was a tension mounting between two groups of people. One group of people was a sailor with his team, a captain and his team of sailors. And another group was the local native people of an island on which these sailors were stranded. Okay? And the reason for the tension is that there was a famine that was looming over the horizon, and the supplies that the local people were giving to the sailors were cut off because of the drought that was coming in. But this captain was very clear. He needed to survive for another few months at least. So he should keep getting the supplies to survive so that he can make his way back out of the island. And he was very knowledgeable. And he had something called as an almanac. Some of you may know what an almanac is. It's an exhaustive list of celestial events that happen in the sky. Okay? And it included eclipses too. And he knew there was an eclipse coming up later that month. And he calls the chief of the native people, of the local people of the island, and he says, "You have angered our gods very much. Our gods are extremely displeased with you by cutting off the supplies. And he's going to express his displeasure in the sky if you don't supply us." And of course, the local people dismissed him, saying that, it's just junk talk. But the day would arrive. The day was Feb 29th, 1504. Imagine the year we're talking about. And it was journaled by the sailor. And as the sun was setting on the west, the moon was rising in the east. That's how when eclipses happen, on full moon day. And as the moon was rising, the bottom part of the moon was already clipped. It was not there. And as the time would progress, more and more of the moon was disappearing. And few hours later, the entire moon turned blood red in color. And that is when the panic strikes the people. And all of them come running to the captain, begging for mercy. "Please talk to your gods. We'll give you whatever you want. Please give us our moon back." And the sailor knows when the eclipse is going to end, right? He knows there was about an hour left for the eclipse to end. So he goes, saying that, "I'll negotiate with the gods. Give me some time." He goes down with his sand clock, waits for an hour, comes back out. "Okay, now I've spoken to the gods." He is very happy. He's appeased. "And now you'll get your moon back." And as he talks, they can see the moon coming out of the earth's shadow. But of course, they don't know it, but the moon is back. Okay? Now, this looks like a story too good to be true, but this has actually happened. And the sailor was none other than Christopher Columbus. And the island that he was stranded on was what we now call as Jamaica. Okay? And it was in 1504. And this happened in February. And he would eventually get the supplies, and he leaves the island in June. Okay? A few months later. Now, keep this story in one part of your mind. Now let's go back further, a half a millennia ago. Again, the year is 1066 AD, and the month was April. And the people of England look up in the sky, and they spot this peculiar object which had a long tail-like appearance in the sky. And today we know it is a comet. And today we know it's not a big deal, but back in the time, whenever you observe a comet, it's a sign of bad omen. It's something bad was about to happen. And people of England thought, okay, something is not right with England. And France is just across the oceans, right? Across the seas. And the Frenchman, his name was William, the Duke of Normandy back then. He decided this was the right time to attack, go on war with England and take control over England. And he looks at the sighting of this comet in April, and he goes to war with England in October. And this battle is called the Battle of Hastings. The very famous historical Battle of Hastings was started by sighting a comet. And he would eventually go on to defeat the King Harold, who was back then the King of England. And William will eventually be crowned the new King of England in 1066. And the history would change forever by sighting of this comet. Now, here is the interesting things. These two major decisions in the stories did not happen out of any human intellect. It happened because of a sighting in the sky. Okay, now here is what we can think about it. Did it affect one person, the incident, the events, or did it affect one particular family? No, it has affected an entire community. It has affected an entire society. In the case of Battle of Hastings, it has changed the course of history for England. England as we know it today is what because of that Battle of Hastings, right? Now, let's think back, step back for a moment in the sailor story. If from the perspective of Christopher Columbus, what would you think? He was a wise man. He was able to use his knowledge to save himself and his team. But often we do forget to look at from the perspective of the local people. What would you say? They have been bamboozled or fooled or tricked into believing that this was a sign of bad and they had to give off their supplies. Despite risking famine, they had to give their supplies. Now, there are two sides of this story. A future shaped, one, by knowledge, and a future can also be shaped by ignorance. Now, what side are we going to be on? Are we going to be looking forward to a future shaped by knowledge or a future shaped by ignorance? Maybe it's beneficial to one group and non-beneficial to the other group, but which side do we want to be on? And this is a question that I always thought about, and this story strikes me as fantastic, in terms of how humans can be manipulated. Okay, so now, I was fortunate enough to observe some of these eclipses myself. Okay, of course, without any fear or superstitious belief, because the ignorance has been dispelled by many, many people. And this is an image of an eclipse that I shot from Kunnur in 2019. Okay, and I was also fortunate enough to observe a comet. Okay, and this is a comet that has a period of 7,000 years. It takes about 7,000 years to go around the sun. Okay, and this I was able to not just enjoy it, but even share it with people without any fear, because I now know what a comet is, unlike the people before. And I forgot to tell you, the comet in the previous story, Battle of Hastings, it has a very famous name. It's called Halley's Comet. I'm sure all of you know, it was the Halley's Comet that triggered the Battle of Hastings, and it circles the sun every 76 years. And back in the time, they didn't know that it was the same comet that kept coming back again and again every 76 years. It was much later, during Newton's time, that people would know this is the same comet that has been coming for centuries and millennia. Okay? Now, people often say ignorance is bliss. We're so used to saying that, right? But I would disagree. Ignorance is source of fear, and fear is source of poor decision making. And poor decision making can impact people who do not share your ignorance, particularly if you are in the power of position of authority, and that is completely unfair. Don't you think it is unfair? And in this particular era of explosion of information, misinformation can trickle down your way through various channels. You guys know it better, WhatsApp, Insta, TikTok, or whatever medium. Misinformation is constantly being bombarded. And how do you defend yourself from this misinformation? I always think, if someone can be trained, on some martial arts, you can defend yourself from physical harm, right? But what is the defense for your mind from misinformation? And that is where I come in. That is where my career stepped in. Popularizing science or developing a sense of wonder in science, focusing on scientific temper and rationality for a collective society as a collective species. Okay? About a decade ago, again, this is an image of Andromeda Galaxy that I shot from Talakaveri about 2 years ago. And about a decade ago, I used to scan the skies. I bought a small telescope, a small refractor, about a 70 mm telescope. I was scanning the skies randomly, and I stumbled upon Saturn. And when I looked through the telescope, I saw the rings for the very first time. I've seen the rings on the books, on images and videos, but I'm looking at it for myself for the first time. And that sight of the rings that I would see that day changed my trajectory. Okay, and I like was shown in the previous video, on a very dark sky, say from Ladakh, some places very dark, you can actually see the Andromeda Galaxy with your naked eye. You don't even need a telescope. Andromeda Galaxy just sits there. And did you know, just about 100 years ago, we thought our Milky Way galaxy was the entire universe, until a person called Edwin Hubble, who would come and say, no, Andromeda is not part of our galaxy. It is so far away, it's about 2.2 million light years away. And that would literally widen our horizon of how big our universe is. And ever since, I've been hooked onto the skies, and I would never stop. Now I thought, okay, now I have my two interests. One is the scientific literacy of a society and my personal interest of astronomy. Now, can I connect these two? I started, looking at the skies, imaging the skies, sharing it with people. This is one of the popular images. You see a star, bright star at the bottom of the screen, and that's Rigel star. Remember in the previous video, they showed you Betelgeuse star. It's diagonally opposite to that, another star in the Orion's constellation, and that's Rigel. And what you see above is a Witch Head Nebula. It's not a cloud in the sky. It's not a water vapor cloud. It's a cloud rich in hydrogen and helium gas where stars are born. Okay, it's a type of nebula called reflection nebula. Okay, and these kind of things really made me obsessed with the skies. And now I started using astronomy. Over the years, I've sparked interest in tens of thousands of kids using astronomy as a tool to teach them science. And not just science, the method of science, how does science work, and how do you use science as a source of defense from misinformation. Okay, of course, you cannot just directly keep telling people, this is right and this isn't right, this is fact and this is not fact. If you were to do that directly by telling what is right and wrong, they will never learn. It's like you cannot fetch them the fish all the time. You have to teach them how to fish, right? And I cannot keep telling what is fact and what isn't fact all the time. I should empower them with a method that they can themselves sort out, tell from what is fiction and what isn't fiction. And that is what we call as rationality or scientific temper. And that's exactly what I've been doing. And right now, I've been doing this for the past 10 years. A lot of my students are stepping out into the real world. And now they have their scientific curiosity and temper intact. And they will be a part of the society that I would like to call scientifically literate society. I believe no longer literacy can be defined if somebody can read and write, you cannot call them, maybe they are literate, but I think adding science as a factor will help a long way in society defending itself. And our founding forefathers of our country understood the importance of this, and they coded this into their constitution itself. Article 51AH of Indian Constitution says to develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform. And this is listed in the Constitution as one of our fundamental duties of a citizen. We would have learned in civics, at least we did, fundamental duties of a citizen, fundamental responsibilities, and this comes directly under fundamental duties of a citizen. And I mean, rightly so. And back in my state, Tamil Nadu, people are generally politically aware, okay? You go to any, I call it tea kadai, tea shop. You go to a tea shop, there'll be 4 people sitting with a newspaper reading, talking about politics. They do talk about movies as well. They're generally politically well aware. But I dream of a time when people can discuss science as much as they discuss politics and movies over a cup of tea in tea kadai. I think that would be a society that I look forward to, that can defend itself from manipulation, that can sort itself, that can progress. And I'm sure that is a society that we can all envy. Thank you.